Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Grow Your Tutoring Business. Today we're talking about starting points and comparisonitis. So many of us fall into a trap, and it's something which I did as well. I wrote an email on the newsletter about this, and I got a number of messages back, and I thought, do you know what? Like, yeah, that doesn't happen that often. I usually get like maybe one for every sort of 5 emails I write, get a reply. But a few people replied and said, "Oh, do you know what? This is me. It really resonated with me." So I thought it would make a really good topic to talk about on here. So I thought I'd share with you what I did a few years ago that stopped me in my tracks. It stopped me growing my business. And I look back now and I think how silly it was. And it's something which I actually talk about on the course because it is something which I think we do naturally. And it's it can have a negative effect on the way that we turn up and the way that we try to grow or not grow our business. So when I first started the tuition business it was before when I dabbled for a little while I was still full-time teaching. And then on my way out of full-time teaching, I kind of went at it a bit harder. And I've said this before where I was teaching full-time, but I was leaving school as early as I could and then like tutoring in the evenings. And I'd spend a full day, Sunday, sort of traveling around in my car going to visit people. And I quickly realized that it was earning some decent money, although I was essentially just not really thinking about the value I was offering. It was just my time for money, and it was doing great because the whole purpose of it was about really paying off some debt or making the debt more manageable. And it was fulfilling that need at the time. And when I wanted to go a bit more sort of more business-like and be take it more seriously and actually sort of make something of it. One of the things I sat down to do was a SWOT analysis. So I've got a business degree. This is something we would do a lot when we were learning about businesses. And we'd always put ourselves in the shoes of the CEO or the owner of that particular business that we were using as a case study. And we would draw out the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And this is how I started, or one of the first tools that I used when I wanted to grow Mr. C's tutoring. So I looked in my local area. I actually started with the strengths. If you're not sure about the strengths, always get someone else to do this for you. So you can say, "What do you think I'm good at? You know, what do you think I would bring when I'm working with children? Yeah, what do you see in me? What are my big what do I bring to the table? What are my strengths?" People will tell you, and you listen and you write them down. Okay, don't doubt it. Just write it down. Just go with it. And then even if you're not sure at the time, just write them down. I think I knew what my strengths were, like the predominant ones, the ones that sort of just fell out of my head in terms of like, this is what you do. This is what you like doing. That's what I wrote down. So things like being a nurture teacher, looking at education holistically, not just through the eyes of trying to help children to become academic, those kind of things. I know lots of us will resonate with that kind of thing. The opportunities are often linked to the threats. And so when we look at what we could be offering, we need to like do it in tandem with what we think the threats are. And the threats are usually what we would consider like our competition. Now, I know we go down the route of, colleagues over competition, but the reality is that I'm a face-to-face tutor mainly, so I look at who's operating in my local area, and I would like take notice of what's going on. Now, it doesn't stop me, so it's not a block, but I would like to know what's going on around me, right? Because that just puts me in a position where I can be a bit more proactive. However, that's now. Back then, I did not do that. Back then, I was looking at the people operating in the area that had websites that were more visible online and that perhaps were advertising for tutors. And that led me to finding Kit McGrath. Now, I'd heard of Kit McGrath. I wasn't really sure what they did or how good they were. I didn't really understand what franchising was back then. I just knew they were a big tuition company operating in my area. And I added them to my threats list and researched them. But actually what happened was it completely stopped me in my tracks, because what I saw was this professional company. They had laptops and computers for everybody. They had tablets. They had this brilliant office, centrally based in the city. Had a car parks the parents could drop off easily and leave them for a bit and come back. Anything that I would have considered back then, maybe you too, to be like the ideal situation for tuition office, tuition space. Also, the other thing they had was that when I did the research on social media, was that when somebody was asking for tuition, often they were the ones that were being, shouted out. They were the ones where parents were going, "Yeah, we took our children to Kit McGrath and it was amazing." And so that word of mouth and the fact they had champions out there almost working for them because of the value that they provided. They're this amazing business, and I was looking thinking, wow, I'm working with like 8 children a week, and I'm not sure I can compete with this. So I didn't, and I didn't try to grow because I thought, well, how are you supposed to compete with that? But the truth is that you're not meant to compete with that. That's a huge franchise based around the UK, maybe overseas as well. They have a marketing budget because that's what you pay for within a franchise, which means that they are super visible on social media and other places too. It's not just social media. And there's little old me with no advertising budget. I'm not doing any promotion outside of my family and friends. And my results represent that. Kit McGrath's results represent the time and effort that they've made to build their business into the structure that it is. And then it reflects the fact that they can advertise and probably spend, at least tens of thousands of pounds on materials and promotions. So my first block and my first bit of advice is, well, with comparison or any comparison, but particularly if it goes down the road into comparisonitis, is to make sure you're comparing yourself with the right thing, the right company, the right person. Because if you do what I did and you lose a year, because that's essentially, I didn't really lose a year, that's really harsh. But what I did do was just stay still for a bit. I didn't go after it as much as what I could have done, because I felt scared of competing with something I was not competing with at all. And actually, the thing that I've probably learned the most, one of the biggest lessons of business, is we're only ever competing against ourselves. Like this is why companies look at year-on-year figures. This is why companies look at like what they made last January compared to this January, and then February to February, and then that quarter to that quarter, because that's what they're trying to do. They're not worried about what other companies are doing. They're looking at what they're doing. And this is called staying in their lane. I don't really like this phrase too much because I think staying in your lane sounds a bit like passive aggressive. I want us to be trying new things. Sometimes coming out of your lane is amazing for us. It's almost like coming out of your comfort zone and doing something different or creating something different. And so I do advise that we do this and that we do stretch ourselves, but at the same time, we don't want to put ourselves under so much pressure or stress that it keeps us still. Like that's not okay. And if we just find the right company to compare ourselves to, we will be able to work out what the opportunities are for real, rather than like take the threat and then go, "Oh my God, I can't do this anymore." And what were the big threats that I came up with? Were the smaller, and what I do now is like, are the smaller kind of people who do, or smaller people, the people who are running tuition businesses, but perhaps they only do kind of 5 or 6 children a week. They might be offering one-to-one at a price where I offer groups, that kind of stuff. So pricing could be a threat, value could be a threat sometimes. It can change. Now, all of these things that we write down here become the opportunities. How do you change something that somebody else is doing that you are considering a threat, and then flipping it around and turning it into an opportunity? So sometimes it's even like silly things like you've done your research and you realize nobody's offering a particular service, and you go, what if I do that? I can like sneak in here and get a slice of the market. As long as it's still aligned with your values and you like doing it, there's no reason why you couldn't just make a success of that one particular thing. So, for example, it could be that nobody's doing any early reading or early maths in your area, or nobody's doing early reading or early maths in the way that you do it, and that becomes your thing, whether you're online or face to face. It doesn't matter. But what we want to do is turn these threats into some sort of an opportunity. So I know that in my local area, for example, there's not many people, not many tutors talk about the mental pressure of taking a test. And I focus on 11 plus really, taking the 11 plus. They're prepping when they're 9 and 10, taking the test when they're either 10 or 11, usually 10 because it's so early in the school year. and we're not really prepping them for a test. And it's such a high stakes test so early can be tricky to navigate. And then do we allow that test to hamper what they could be doing and achieving at school because they're so worried about it? That in a similar way that it stops us from growing as a business because we're scared of a threat, does it also stop the children from turning up in school in the right way and applying themselves because I'm not fully focused on the test, I'm sure they're not, but it's just in the back of their mind? So I talk a lot about this because this one is something which I'm good at, is in my strengths column, but I also see that's not what standard in my area, what standard tutors would be talking about. So I make sure I do, and it's like a different voice out there. It's more nurturing. And so I try to capture those sorts of families who do want to have a nurturing approach to this. So I've kind of looked at the threats, turned it into an opportunity. What will you find? I mean, we don't know yet. Like, you'll do your research, and then it's about flipping it into the positive. So you take the threat, or you find the gap, and you go, right, where do I fit in here? What can I fit in? What can I squeeze in? Is there something that I'm missing? Now, I don't think a SWOT analysis is something that we want to do like a lot of. Maybe it's a once a year thing. It might be something you do every 6 months, or at that point where you think like you're ready to take the step to the next phase. It's just such an easy tool to bring out and go, right, okay, the next phase could look like this, but what are my strengths and weaknesses telling me? Where are my opportunities? What are the threats to making this happen? So, for example, a big threat at the moment is the economy. Like, we don't really know like what's happening with the economy. It's very up and down. Forecasts are very strange. Like, some people are really positive, some people are super negative. I don't really know what's going on. And what happens when it's like this is there's a lot of unrest around money, and we tend to hoard. We tend to say, look, do you know what? I'd rather err on the side of caution and keep it. And there's something there that's super valuable. So a threat would be the economy, but then how can we use that to create an opportunity? One of the big opportunities with anything around when there's unrest like this is to stack something up with full of value and offer it at a no-brain price. But you still have to look after the business. So this is where you get large to medium-sized tuition groups, full of value, full of knowledge, still going to take a child from point A to point B, but it's accessible. And so things like that are really growing at the moment. And this is taking like a threat that's perhaps sits outside of what we would usually look at and just go, this is just general economic stuff. Like, actually, there is a lot of unrest out there. The change of government recently, like even like the talk, I mean, the news is always doom and gloom, but I mean, it just feels lots of doom and gloom in the news at the moment with things happening over in sort of the Ukraine and Russia, and even things in our own country as well. Like, it just feels a bit uneasy. So there's lots of kind of uneasiness going on. How can we like use some of this into our and sort of leverage something into our business that just helps like give a bit of clarity for people, and actually not like leveraging on people's emotions, but just saying, look, here's some support. This is what it looks like. This is how much it's going to cost. This is the value you'll get from it, and just keep doing that over and over again. So the last thing I want to say here is just a very quick recap. When we're comparing ourselves to others, which is something that we just do naturally, be careful with who you're actually comparing yourself to. We all have different starting points. Some of us have a starting point of absolute zero, never run a business before, have never had anybody in our family run a business before, never had any mentoring. So it's just like feels really brand new. We don't know what to do. Well, others might start exactly the same time as you and their business accelerates, and you might go, oh my God, they're much better than me. But we don't know their whole story. I'm so privileged that I've spoken to a lot of tutors over the last couple of years. And whenever somebody's made accelerated progress, there is always an underlying reason why. Now, often it's because they've grown up where they've had people in their family who have run businesses, or they've spent time in somebody else's business and they've sort of been taken under the owner's wing a little bit and been shown how it works. And so they're not coming from it completely fresh. Some people also do just have really good business brains, and they don't realize it until they start running their own business and they're making decisions left and right, and everything's working. They think it's luck, but actually when you scratch the surface, you go, you've just got good business acumen. There's somewhere somebody's added some knowledge to you, or you've done it yourself through listening to podcasts or reading books, and you're making really sound business choices. And that's okay, right? And there'll be some people that are like that. And I experienced this myself when I did one-to-many with Lisa Johnson back in 2020. Even in the challenge weeks, which I know some of you would have experienced either last year or this year, there were people by the end of the challenge week had launched something and made sort of 5 grand, 10 grand. And I looked on and was like, how are people doing this? This is insane to me. And then other people then went on to the one-to-many course, same time as me. By the end of the course had like 20,000, 30,000 pound launches. And I'm like, wow, that's just incredible. They must just be so much better at it than me. But then you go and talk to them and you realize they've been running a business for 5 years. They've been growing an audience for 3 years, and they've done all these things like over the last sort of 3 or 4 years that have led them to that point. You don't just, this things doesn't just happen overnight. So I think always try to understand we all have these different starting points. Case in point, right, today, I went back to the gym today. I've not been for about 4 months and I was dreading it. Like, I wouldn't say I'm completely unfit, like I've still got a level of fitness, but the fact that I don't play football anymore and I'm not doing any kind of sport on a weekly basis, I'm not as fit as what I once was. Let's just say that. And going into the gym today, I was really nervous about it because you get niggles and it's hard when you first start out, and it's not an easy process, whether it's like creating the habit or actually working out what you're going to do. But there was a guy in there who I got chatting to. And and I want to be really respectful about this, but he was probably between 5, maybe 6 stone overweight. And so for him, the challenge is a lot different. I bet he wished he could go on the treadmill, jump up the speed a little bit and run for 10 minutes like I did this morning. But instead, he's there and he's walking slowly because that's all he can manage at the moment until he sheds a little bit more or gets a little bit fitter. And so we have these different starting points. And so he might go into the gym and compare himself to somebody who's been going to the gym for 3 years and is really muscly and really strong. Whereas actually that's not fair. What he needs to do is just take care of himself, keep going one day at a time, keep doing the right things in and around the gym, and he'll get the results that he wants. In the same way, that's the same for me. I just have this different starting point. I can run for 10 minutes. Even though it's quite slowly, I can still do it. And so I'm not going to compare myself to anybody who's sort of been going to gym for 5 years in the same way I shouldn't have compared myself to a multi-million pound franchise company back in 2019 that actually stopped me from growing for a year. And I don't want you to do the same thing. So be careful who you compare yourself with. Make it purposeful. Don't let it block you. It does have a purpose. You will find the opportunities for your business to grow without a doubt if you do the right things. If you want any support with this, you know where to find me. We have one-to-one coaching. We have the membership. We have our live meetups. We also have TutorFest 2025, which is all coming into place, ready for our July meetup. We can't wait for that. But if you need anything at all, please just reach out to us. Right, I'll leave you there for this week. Let me know what you think about this episode. Is it something which has resonated with you? Do you suffer from comparisonitis? Do you worry about what other people are doing? I'd love to hear your stories around this as well. And I'll speak to you all soon. And see you later. Bye-bye.